is Michael Minna, who currently is completing his MD and PhD degrees at Emory University. A 2006 graduate of Dartmouth College, Michael founded a nonprofit NGO, Grassroot Health Incorporated, based on his senior studies in Nicaragua, through which he teaches rural communities how to develop micro-businesses aimed at producing chlorine for water purification with solar energy, salt, and river water. While at Dartmouth, Michael traveled to Sri Lanka on a Tucker Fellowship to shadow at a rural medical clinic and teach English to Buddhist monks. He was himself later ordained as a Buddhist monk at a meditation monastery in the mountains of Sri Lanka. Welcome.
From the time I arrived at Dartmouth's doorsteps almost 11 years ago, I, like many of you, have had truly tremendous opportunities. For me, these opportunities have brought me around the globe. They've introduced me to people and cultures that I didn't think I'd meet, and they've introduced me to my own spirituality. They've provided opportunity for teaching, and they've tempted my passion to do good in this world. The thread that's bound much of my travel, my work, and my play over the years, both within the US and abroad, has been this eagerness and a love of sorts for trying to help make something, be it a person, a community, or environment, better than how I was introduced to it. The notion of doing good and feeling good about what we do is, after all, what I believe brings purpose to life and provides fulfillment. Perhaps for some insatiable need to realize that we are not each living alone here, and we are not here on this earth for no reason, but at the very least to help this one individual or group in this one moment, or make one entity better and more productive. The question is what and how to fulfill the desire to help others. The what part of the question is highly personal, and people inevitably, I believe, find their own niche that they may carve out for themselves. It may be helping teach someone to use an iPad, or it may be helping to rid the world of diseases that plague millions. There isn't a right or wrong answer to what we can do. Therefore, the question I want to discuss is how to do this, and in particular, how do we help in the most beneficial way as possible. I believe I was asked here today perhaps because I've had some interesting experiences abroad. And while they've been interesting to some, they've been riddled with many failures and few successes. And I'd like to spend the next few minutes discussing a few of the lessons that I've learned from a particular failure of sorts that I hold dear, and I think I will continue and likely always hold dear and continue to learn from. In 2004, while I was at Dartmouth, I happened to be meditating in Sri Lanka when the Indian Ocean tsunami struck the coast of that country in December. It was a tremendously sad day, obviously, for both the world and in particular Southeast Asia. But despite the destruction and death that was left in the tsunami's wake, to see the global response, the millions who wanted to help in some way, it was encouraging, to say the least. Because I was there on the ground at that time, when I wrote a letter back to the States pleading for donations, people were eager to donate, and the campaign quickly raised a number of thousands of dollars. And I moved to a refugee camp where I intended to use the funds. Over the coming weeks and months, I looked for ways to spend the donations within the camp. But for every use I could come up with, it seemed there may be some other donor who was going to buy the boats or build the houses. Nevertheless, I remained there, intent on finding a use for these funds, particularly because the refugees in this camp were constantly caring for me like I was one of their own. They cooked me rice, they brought me tea in the mornings, and I listened as they spoke to me about the tsunami, day after day. We had grown close, and I thought it was my duty to use those funds in this particular community. And as the weeks drew on, it became apparent that my role at this camp was different than I had intended. I entered the camp believing I was going to help build an orphanage and put the donations to good use. And I kept pushing and pushing for this struggle, for these houses to be built. And I was struggling to make my time and the resources that the community was putting into me to be of value. And in so doing, I realized that I was being foolish, I was being stubborn, I wasn't listening. and I was failing to recognize that through the eyes of the community that I aim to help, my role had already become crystal clear. They didn't care about the donations or the money. They didn't want it. What they wanted, and perhaps at the time what they needed most from me, had nothing to do with money or what I had raised, or any physical help I believed I could provide. Turned out I couldn't really provide any. I had become quite emaciated. My role there had taken on a very different form than what I had set out. And unbeknownst to me, I had already carved out a niche for myself in that community. And that was to be a willing and outside person, an ear to listen over and over to the terrible and tragic stories of how many of them lost their children and their parents, their aunts, their uncles, how they saw their family members get washed away against the rocks so hard that they never revived. I had become somewhat of an outlet, a community therapist, if you will, and one that was far too young and far too naive for that job. And beyond that, I had unwittingly become a beacon of hope for many. An American living in the refugee camp sent a signal, not through speech, but by mere presence alone, that things might be okay. And that America was going to ensure that they would not starve and they would see their children buried properly, and they would again prosper as a fishing village. But after months in the camp, I had grown emaciated, I got sick, and my mind and heart broke from hearing the incessant stories that I was not prepared nor trained to hear and process. And I broke. I had to leave, I felt no choice, and I packed up and went. And this is when it hit me. They didn't expect me to leave. No matter what I said, my actions said to them that I was staying. And they had grown used to me, they had treated me like family, and on that day that I left, I believe I had done much harm to a community that had already lost so much. And for some who I had grown particularly close to and had come to rely on me as somewhat of a therapist, and others who thought of me as a replacement child or someone to take care of, and for the young boys who loved to play and bring me peacock feathers, and for those who grew to expect my short little English lessons. For these people, it was particularly hard, and there were tears. There were far too many tears when I finally walked away from that camp that day. And now I'm here, and I have a profound understanding that no matter how good our intentions, however positive they may be, it is our responsibility to understand and to acknowledge the ramifications of our actions through the eyes and hearts of those we aim to help. It's our duty, if we aim to aid somebody at whatever level that may be, to not be naive to how we are interpreted and what our actions are doing, both beneficial and detrimental. I learned the importance of being driven by intention and not by goals. My goal was to fund an orphanage in the camp, but clearly that was not needed at all at the time. Had I, however, been driven by attention alone to help, I would have arrived at that camp willing and entirely open to hearing the needs and concerns of the refugees. I would have been more able to responsibly offer my assistance. To the best of my capacity, I would have put the donations to good use earlier on, and I wouldn't have put myself in harm's way. And I also learned the importance of being incredibly educated about what we do. And I've learned this in every task that I've taken since then. We need to know what we're doing, particularly when others' well-beings are on the line, to really understand what we're doing and how and why we're doing it. To understand the intricacies and the nuances of what it means to someone else, what it can add, and most importantly, what it can detract, both directly and indirectly. Today I feel lucky that I was afforded this experience. As terrible as it was, and it has been in times, it's given me insight and has provided me many more lessons than I could possibly count. And I hope that by sharing this experience with you, you too can learn from this, and as I have, and am continuing to do, I hope that you can help to make the most of such a terrible, tragic loss that the global community felt. And I'll leave you with this one quote by the Dalai Lama. I think it resonates well with some of the different talks and people we've heard speak today. That is to remember that not getting what you want is sometimes a wonderful stroke of luck.